In the morning, I noticed that my Alzheimer's pills were missing. My daughter had hidden them from me. She wanted my house, my bank account, my jewelry as soon as possible. She needed to provide for her unemployed husband, and she decided that by getting rid of me, she would get my entire fortune. I burst into tears from the realization. I began to think that I was a bad mother if my daughter wanted me to disappear for money. And a few minutes later, my daughter came into the room. I asked her, "Where are my pills? Did you hide them?" She answered in a soft voice that I did not recognize. "You forget," she said, looking at the empty space on the table where my organizer should have been. "Maybe it's better to give your body a rest." Her hands were busy. She was straightening my blanket, which was not crooked anyway, tapping on the drawer, which I had already checked twice. She didn't look at me as she added, "You know how those drugs can make things worse?" "Worse than what?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I'd been reading their faces for months. Hers, cautiously sweet; his, cautiously silent. She was hiding them. She wanted me confused, pliable, so I could move into a nursing home so she could sell my house. Let the fog settle over me, let the words slip from my memory, let me nod as she signed my guardianship papers. Her husband was unemployed again. I heard the tension in the way she said "we" now, as if marriage had erased her first face. "We need a room. We need security. We need stability." I listened as she opened cabinets she'd never cleaned, as she pretended to help me find things she'd hidden out of sight. "Maybe you threw them away," she said easily, as if I were throwing life preservers in the trash. "You do that sometimes." "No." My voice was steady. My mind was steady. The pills helped me stay that way. Without them, the lines blur. That was the plan, wasn't it? Let my Alzheimer's get worse, speed up the process, rush the conservatorship, sell the house, fix their problem with the roof I paid for and the walls I painted. How could my own daughter stand here and pretend she's saving me while she steals me? The question scraped my throat, but I kept it inside. I smiled instead. I poured tea I didn't want and watched her watch me. She didn't see what mattered, the spare bottle tucked behind the flower, the one I fill from the pharmacy bag before anyone visits. She didn't see the tiny recorder in my sewing box. Noya reminded me about it last week, that little silver thing I used to capture your grandfather's stories. "Nana," she whispered, "if they say the wrong thing, make sure it becomes the right evidence." My daughter reached across the table and patted my hand. "We'll take care of everything," she said, as if care were a deed you could sign and sell. "Little did you know," I said, matching her gentle tone. "I'm taking care of everything, too." But to understand how this kitchen turned into a battlefield, I have to go back to the beginning. I am 71. I have been called many things in my life: bookkeeper, wife, choir alto, mother of two. Recently, the label has been patient. Early stage Alzheimer's, the doctor said last winter, sitting shoulder to shoulder with me while the snow worried itself against the clinic windows. The word landed like a new piece of furniture, too large for the room, ugly, impossible to ignore. "We caught it early," he added. "You're strong, you have routines, you have people." He smiled. I did not. "Routines I can build. People are less reliable. I came home and did what I know how to do. I made lists. It's what kept me sane when I ran payroll for 36 years and never once missed a payday. I listed medications. I listed bills on auto pay. I listed passwords on paper and then again in a little black book only Noya knows about. I listed the location of the deed, the will, the insurance policies, and because my husband always said hope is not a plan, the name of an elder law attorney I asked our choir director about when her sister got sick. Lena did not like my lists. She said they made me obsessive. She wrinkled her nose at my pill organizer like it smelled of failure. "Mom, relax," she'd say, plucking the Sunday square as if the week itself were a stubborn weed. "You live in your head too much. Let us help." Us was Lena and her husband, Roman, who is always between jobs and always just about to land something big. At first, their visits were sweet. Groceries, a clogged sink cleared, a light bulb replaced. Then came the questions that sounded like compliments. "How do you keep up this house alone?" Don't you get lonely at night? Do you feel safe driving? Each question carried a hook, and every time I answered yes, no, yes, I felt the tug. The fall happened in February. Nothing dramatic. A rug corner, a wet shoe, a foolish hurry. I bruised my hip and my pride, but I was fine by morning. It didn't matter. The fall became a character in our story, a third child who never left the room. Lena never spoke without introducing it. After your fall, we thought, considering the fall, Mom. A month later, I heard Roman on the phone in the hallway call it a near-fatal accident. He saw me and smiled, his voice dropping into that tone men use when they want to sound reasonable. Exaggeration sells, he said, tapping his nose. I did not sleep much that night. I sat at the kitchen table and read the words on the attorney's website about guardianship. I read them again until I could say them out loud without flinching. In the morning, I called the number. Her name is Marta Delgado, 63, with a laugh like a drawer of silverware shifting. I like clients who prepare, she said after I laid out my lists. I like clients who tell me the truth. Do you have someone you trust to act if you cannot? Noya, I said. My granddaughter, she's 20. She remembers details better than I do, and she listens when people forget to lower their voices. Good, Marta said. Let's build scaffolding around you. Durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and, if you'll let me sell you on it, a living trust for the house. You can be the trustee while you're able. If you become unable, your successor steps in. No court, no guardianship circus. Who becomes the successor trustee? Noya, I said again. The name felt like a key in a lock. And we met twice. I brought cookies. She brought drafts on yellow paper. When the papers were ready, I invited my sister's friend from church, who is a notary, and we signed at the dining table with the apricot trees, nodding outside like old judges. I transferred the house into the trust with hands that shook only afterward. I placed the originals in my safe and the copies in a labeled box behind the sewing machine. Then the morning with the daisies arrived, and so did the missing pills. The easiest way to steal a woman is to convince her she is already gone. Lena understands this. She also understands how a narrative gathers speed. Mom, you've been so tired. You forgot the kettle yesterday. She had turned the stove on and walked out for 15 minutes. I have the footage to prove it. The little motion-activated camera my neighbor, Peter, the retired firefighter, installed over the sink when I told him I was uneasy. A good house keeps secrets, Peter said, but a smart house keeps receipts. Noya came that evening with croissants and the look she gives me when she is about to lie for a good reason. I can't stay long, she said, but she stayed long enough to show me how the recorder works, long enough to tuck it into the pocket of my cardigan when the doorbell rang. Family meeting, Lena announced, stepping in without wiping her feet. Roman followed, thick with aftershave. He nodded at the table. Let's all be grown-ups. I'm 71, I said. It's the only thing I am professionally. Roman smiled as if I had told a joke. We found a place, he said, sliding a glossy brochure across the table. Sun Meadows. They have memory care, social activities, great ratings. I like this place, Lena added quickly. They have an arts room. Remember how you used to quilt, Mom? You could do that again. I never stopped, I said. Her eyes flicked to the basket of squares by the window and then away. And I don't need memory care. Not now, she said, soft and reasonable. But soon. Maybe sooner than you think, Roman cleared his throat. We also talked to a realtor. Market's hot. It would be a crime not to maximize. We can get you settled before the snow. Before the snow, I repeated it like a new hymn. I lifted the brochure. The cover photo showed a woman with a silver bob smiling at a man while they watered a plant together. Her eyes had the flat shine of catalog models. I wondered what she had lost before she learned to smile like that. I appreciate your concern, I said, but I'm not moving. Silence is a kind of weather. It can be warm or it can make your joints ache. This silence reigned. Lena's mouth pinched. Roman's jaw worked. Noya stared at her thumbs, then glanced at me. I nodded. She stood. "I'll get more tea," she said brightly and crossed to the stove. Her backpack swung against her hip. She plugged in her phone and, with a movement that looked like a stretch, switched the camera on. Lena leaned forward. "Mom, we can do this the easy way. Or we can talk to Adult Protective Services and the court about your decline." "My decline?" "The forgetting," she said, tapping the table between us as if my symptoms sat there like an extra cup. "The fall. The empty pill containers. I take my medication," I said evenly. "Do you?" Roman asked, his voice sliding toward scold. "Because we checked the organizer and the pharmacy records. You've missed doses." "Interesting," I said and placed my hands neatly in my lap. The recorder was warm under my cardigan. "Would you like to tell me when you checked? Or would you like to tell the judge?" Roman chuckled. "No one wants judges. We want cooperation." "I like judges," I said. "They're trained to notice who is lying." Lena's face sank for a second, then rallied. "You're making this adversarial?" She drew a stack of papers from her tote. "We found a form online. It's a basic power of attorney. If you sign, I can manage the house sale, your bills, your care." I watched my hands stay calm. "A basic form," I repeated. "From where?" "A reputable website," she said, coloring. I nodded toward the dining room. "I have an attorney," I said. "Her name is Marta Delgado. I also have a durable power of attorney and a trust. They are not from a website. They were drafted for me by a person who has my name on her calendar, not on a template." Roman frowned. "Mom," he began, as if I were his. "Let's not make this complicated." "Complicated?" I smiled. "This is the simple version." They left angry. They left with their brochure and their empty hands. On the porch, Lena turned and said, "You'll be sorry when you need us, and we're not there?" I closed the door. I leaned against it and let my breath come in pieces. "You saw the recorder?" I asked without looking at Noya. "I saw," she said. "I saw everything." The call came 2 days later, a social worker named Kyla, all vowels and apologies. "I received a referral regarding concerns for your safety," she said. "It mentions wandering, medication mismanagement, and a fall. Would you be open to a home visit?" "Of course," I said. "I make good tea." Kyla arrived with a tote full of forms and kind eyes I wanted to trust. Peter was there fixing my back steps. I invited him to stay. "I live across the street," he said cheerfully, shaking Kyla's hand. "I hear everything whether I want to or not." We sat. Kyla asked questions, the ones I had heard in the clinic, but with more layers. "Any confusion about time? Any trouble with finances? Any missed medications?" I answered carefully and truthfully. "I write everything down," I said, showing her my lists, the calendar with names, the medication blister pack with dates. "I also have a new practice," I added. "I take a photograph of the pills in my palm each morning and evening with the clock in the frame." I slid my phone across the table. "Peter taught me," I said. Peter raised his wrench in a half salute. Kyla nodded, almost smiling. "That's smart." She hesitated. "Do you feel pressured by family to make decisions you don't want?" I held her gaze. "Yes." She wrote something down, then looked up again. "Would you like referrals? Legal aid? Caregiver support? An Alzheimer's group? I would like you to note," I said gently, "that if my daughter calls again, I am not to be referred to any program by her or her husband. I have an attorney. I will call her myself." Kyla nodded. "I'll document that." "You have more support than many people I meet. I had to build it," I said. "The people who should have been my support are reassigning themselves." That night, Noya slept on my sofa, under the quilt I made when she was born. In the morning, she woke with her hair like a halo and said, "I have an idea." Her idea was theater. "Invite them back," she said. "Let them think it's working." All of it. Let them bring papers and a notary and a witness. Let them read scripts they wrote for themselves. You'll be polite. You'll ask questions that sound naive. Then we'll let Marta, Marta and Dr. Hassan do the heavy lifting, Dr. Hassan. Your geriatrician, she said, rolling her eyes at my slowness. The one who tested you and said your MoCA score is 26. He'll be here, not as your savior, just as your doctor doing a routine medication review. Marta will be here too, only in the dining room, the way you always kept adults and children in separate rooms at holidays. We'll catch them on both sides. I stared at her and saw my husband's strategy face. You're frighteningly good at this, I said. She shrugged. You taught me to count change in my head and to smell lies. We set the table, not with china, no performance deserves porcelain, but with the old blue plates and the chipped sugar bowl. Peter tightened the front door latch and tested the microphones where we had tucked them, one in the fern on the hutch and one under the table lip. I called Lena and said, I've been thinking. Maybe I've been stubborn. Come by on Saturday with what you want me to sign. She arrived 5 minutes early with Roman and a woman I didn't know. The woman introduced herself as a notary and then as a friend. I have been a woman long enough to know the difference. They sat. Lena placed a fresh stack of papers in front of me, and this time they were not from the internet. The letterhead belonged to a law office I recognized, a factory for quick divorces and faster bankruptcies. The top page was a quitclaim deed. The second was a standard power of attorney naming Lena as ownant. The third was a blank but notarized medical directive form. You'll just sign here, here, and here, Lena said, tapping. We filled most of it out for you, so it's easy. I like easy, I said, and turned to the notary. Do you have identification? The woman blinked. Excuse me? I'm old-fashioned, I said. I like to know who's at my table. She produced a laminated card and held it toward me. I read her name and the expiration date. I smiled. Thank you, I said, and lifted my teacup. The recorder warmed against my ribs. There was a knock at the door. Noya moved to answer. Hi, Nana, she called. It's Dr. Hassan. You asked him to stop by and look at your new pill pack? Lena's mouth opened. Roman's jaw twitched. We're busy, Lena said. With my health? I asked sweetly. I hope not. Dr. Hassan came in with his smile and his satchel. I only need 5 minutes, he said, setting the satchel on the counter. Mrs. Novak, is it all right if I check your medications? It is, I said. And my memory while you're at it, since we have so many interested parties. He glanced at Lena and Roman, then at the papers on the table. Something gentled in his face. I can do a brief screen, he said, and we ran through months backward and a few word lists. It is a humiliating dance, even when you perform it well. When we finished, he nodded. No change since last visit. He jotted a note. Continue current regimen. Regimen, Roman repeated, as if the word owed him rent. Dr. Hassan zipped his satchel. If you have concerns, he said to Lena, polite but firm, you can call my office. But I recommend you let your mother continue her routines. Routines are medicine, too. He glanced at me. I'll see myself out. Good afternoon. The front door clicked. The room shrank. Lena tapped the deed again with a fingernail, now so short it must have been chewed. Let's focus, she said. This is just cleanup. Paperwork. The house is too much for whom? I asked. For you? For all of us, she said. You think you're punishing me, but you're punishing yourself. Sun Meadows has people, mom, community. You could make friends, I said, and pictured the woman on the brochure watering a plant with her catalog husband. I have friends. I looked at Noya. Go ahead. Noya lifted her phone and set it on the table face up. A video played. Lena in my kitchen 2 days earlier, slipping my medication organizer into her tote, whispering to Roman, if she starts missing doses, Kyla will flag her and the judge won't argue. Roman's reply was clear. 2 weeks of confusion and she'll sign anything. The notary made a small noise. Lena's face went the color of skim milk. Roman reached for the phone, and Noya, who has his mother's wrists but her grandfather's reflexes, palmed it away. I spoke into the white hum that followed. You will take that recording and the copies to Miss Delgado's office this afternoon, I said to Noya. You will also drop a copy at the bank where my trust is on file. Peter? Peter leaned in from the kitchen doorway where he had been a refrigerator's shadow. "Yes, ma'am." "Would you escort our guests out?" Roman stood so quickly his chair skittered. "You can't do this," he spat. "We're family." "Family doesn't do this," I said. My voice surprised me with its strength. "You filed an emergency guardianship petition yesterday. You listed wandering and combative behavior. You attached photographs of my stove taken after you turned it on yourself. You claimed I fell twice more this month. You will withdraw that petition by 5 p.m. or I will meet you in court with representation." "How?" Lena began. "You forget I ran payroll," I said. "I can follow paper across town blindfolded. And you forget I am not alone. That social worker you called, she liked my lists. They left with their edges showing." The notary muttered an apology that I decided to accept, because women are often paid to witness things that don't deserve to be witnessed. Marta called an hour later. "Well done," she said. "Bring me the recording. We'll prepare for court anyway." "Will it come to that?" "People who almost get away with something often try again," she said. "And judges like it when women your age arrive with evidence instead of hysteria." I slept for 3 hours and woke with my heart arguing with my ribs. I made toast and ate it over the sink like a teenager. The house was quiet the way a chapel is quiet after a wedding, flower-breathed, messy, newly holy. In the morning, Lena texted. "We need to talk," she wrote. "No lawyers." I set the phone face down and called Marta. "Do not meet alone," Marta said. "If they insist, we can meet here." We met at Marta's office, which smelled like paper and lemon oil. Lena came without Roman and sat with her knees pressed together like a student. "I'm sorry," she said, not looking at me. "I got scared." "You got greedy," Marta said gently. "Fear is different." Lena's eyes flashed. "You don't know us." "I know what a quitclaim deed looks like next to a brochure," Marta said. "I know what a daughter's voice sounds like when she says her mother is helpless while her mother is across the table signing checks and speaking in full sentences." She folded her hands. "Lena, here is what will happen. You will withdraw your petition. You will sign an agreement not to interfere in any sale or transfer related to the house. You will not contact any agency on your mother's behalf. You will not be her agent for anything. If you do, we will seek a protective order and pursue a claim for attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Lena stared at the ceiling as if it could write her a better script. She signed. We walked out into daylight that felt more like weather than light. Roman did not enjoy being left out. He arrived at my house that evening while Noya and I were folding laundry. He did not knock. The door was locked, and when he rattled it, Peter's porch light blinked on across the street. I opened the door a crack and said, "You are not welcome here." "You think you're smart," he said, leaning on the word think like it owed him money. "But you're old. You'll slip. When you do, this whole fantasy falls apart." "I am old," I said, "and I will slip. The difference between us is I prepared for it." I closed the door and slid the chain. It has been there for 30 years. It felt new. 2 weeks passed. The world went on doing what it does. The apricot trees littered the lawn with yellow coins. The mailman waved. The neighbor boys rode their bikes in a loop until someone's mother called them to dinner. I slept better. I took my pills. Kyla called to say she had closed the referral with no concerns and had documented Lena's involvement. "If anyone calls again," she said, "we'll know the context." I wish that had been the end. On a Tuesday morning, shaped like any other, my bank called. "Mrs. Novak," the woman said, "we have a question about a transfer request from your online profile. It seems out of pattern. I haven't used online banking in 2 years. I go to the branch with my checkbook and my good pen because the tellers call me by name and because habits are a kind of fence." "I did not make any transfer," I said. "What account?" She told me. The account Lena and I opened together when she was 16 so she could deposit her babysitting money. The bank never deleted her profile connection, and someone had added a new device. I stared at the kitchen clock and felt the minute hand skip. "We'll lock it," the woman said. "We've flagged the IP address. There's a note here from Miss Delgado to contact her on any unusual activity." Marta arrived at my table with 2 men I had never seen and a folder thick as lasagna. "Forensic IT," she said, introducing them, "and A document examiner. Lena is not the only ambitious one. Ambition takes many shapes. Roman's was a hot, sloppy thing. He had used my old email, guessed my favorite teacher, and gotten as far as the second security question before the system asked for a code I would never receive because I no longer carried that phone. He failed, but he had been busy elsewhere. The examiner held up a copy of a loan application bearing my name, my address, and a signature that looked almost like mine. Close, she said, but the pressure is wrong on the downstroke. In the rhythm, you don't hesitate before your Ks. Roman had applied for a line of credit against the trust property, not understanding that the trustee had to sign, not the homeowner, and that the trustee was me. It would have been funny if it had not been me they were trying to harvest. We filed a police report. The detective who took it was 55, with a father who had died the year before in a jacket that didn't quite fit. He looked at me with the complicated sympathy of men who are both sons and sometimes suspects. "We see this too often," he said. "It gets worse before it gets better." But it does get better. Lena called that night, her voice ragged. "I didn't know," she said. "He told me it was an application for a job training grant in your name. He said it would help with taxes." "Do you believe yourself when you say that out loud?" I asked. The cruelty surprised me, and I let it stand. "You have two choices, Lena. Leave him or become him. I will not be collateral while you decide." Silence. Then a small sound I remembered from when she was 5 and scraped both knees on the driveway. "I don't know how to leave," she whispered. "You start by telling the truth to someone who can do something about it," I said. "Not to me, to the detective, to yourself." 2 days later, she did. She gave a statement. Roman was charged with attempted fraud and forgery. It did not change him, and he came to my house one last time, this time with his brother and a new rage that didn't bother to pretend. Peter met them at the sidewalk with a phone in his hand and a calm so solid it felt like a wall. "The police are on their way," he said. "You should leave." Roman laughed. Old men and their phones. Peter lifted his free hand and flexed it, the skin creased and strong. "Old firefighters and their hoses," he said. "You want to see what I can do with a garden one?" They left. Roman did not return. The hearing we had prepared for was brief because Lena had already withdrawn. The judge, late 50s, thin tie, the eyes of a man who has read too many bad scripts, listened, while Marta laid out the recording and the forged forms in the sequence of my lists. "This is a woman who has early-stage disease and late-stage foresight," Marta said. "She has support. She has a plan. She is not a ward of anyone." The judge looked at me. "How are you doing, Mrs. Novak?" "I have learned that love is not a contract," I said, "and that trust can be a document when it cannot be a feeling." His mouth twitched. "That's not bad," he said. "Petition denied, protective order granted. Miss Novak, you will have no contact with your mother for 90 days except through counsel. If you violate, I will revisit." "Mr. Novak?" He glanced at Roman's empty seat. "Should he appear, will be subject to the same." He tapped his pen. "Good luck to everyone. I mean that afterward, in the hallway that smelled of coffee and cleaning fluid, Noya tucked her arm through mine and said, "Can we go home now?" Home. The word had survived everything. The summer tilted toward fall. I learned my new medication schedule the way you learn a dance with a new partner, hesitant, then sure. I joined a Tuesday group at the library for people like me and people who love people like me. We ate cookies and talked about the indignities of gentle theft, names that won't stay, the word for a spatula that hides like a fox, and we traded tricks like jewel thieves. "Put the kettle on the stovetop only when you're about to boil," someone taught me. "Otherwise, it lives in the cupboard." I stopped leaving it out like an invitation to fear. Lena moved into a studio apartment near her work. She had found a job at a dentist's office answering phones. She came to the house on the 91st day with a bouquet of the cheapest flowers I've ever seen. She stood on the porch with her mouth brave and her hands shaking. "I want to fix what I broke," she said. I don't know how long it will take. But I want to try. You may try, I said. I left the door open and let her stand on the threshold while we talked. I did not invite her in. Forgiveness isn't the same as access. Noya still sleeps over once a week. On Thursdays, we cook together and email her professors at midnight with questions that sound smarter than we feel. And on Sundays, Peter eats with us, and we let him tell one more firehouse story than we pretend to want. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is so quiet, even the refrigerator won't confess its presence, I take out the recorder and listen to my husband talk about the summer we couldn't afford air conditioning and fell asleep on the kitchen floor like casualties. His voice is a rope in water. What did revenge look like in the end? Not a triumph, not a victory lap. It looked like a stack of papers with my name spelled correctly. It looked like a judge's signature and a neighbor's porch light and a granddaughter's small hand steadying a phone. It looked like saying no every day that I might have said yes out of habit or fear. It looked like allowing Lena the dignity of her own consequences while refusing to carry them for her. Some mornings the fog comes anyway. It floats at the edge of the sink, at the rim of the mug, at the top stair. And on those mornings, I make the bed and call Noya and say, tell me one true thing. She always has a supply. Apricot season is longer than you think. The mailman has a new grandson. The library has ordered more large print mysteries. I write them down and put the paper in my pocket. I read it when the fog thickens. It thins. I found my pills again, of course. Not that day, but soon. They were under the dish towels that weren't crooked, and then in the flour bin, and then, for a grim flourish, in the freezer next to the bag of peas no one wants. Lena cried when she admitted it, and I wanted to rescue her from the part of herself that thought she had to do it. Then I remembered I had already rescued someone. The woman who lives in this house, who makes lists, who refuses to be turned into a story someone else gets to tell about helplessness. On the first day of real autumn, with air that smelled like pencils and promise, I stood by the apricot trees and traced the seam where old branches met newer growth. I thought of my husband's toolbox and my granddaughter's backpack and Marta's folder and Peter's wrench. I thought of Kyla's tote bag and the judge's thin tie and the notary's laminated card. I thought of the recorder in my pocket and the voice inside it that says over and over that the truth takes its time but always arrives. Little did you know, I whisper sometimes to the empty room, to the memory of Lena's careful hands and Roman's reasonable tone. I've been preparing for this day my whole life. And then I put the kettle on, not as an invitation to fear, but as proof that a kitchen can return to itself. And I make tea, and I sit by the window, and I begin again.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.